Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us. We're so glad you're here. I am Colin Anderson. I'm a systems engineer here at Embrace. I run demos for customers and I help them throughout trial. So it's good to have you here. So first of all, let's set the stage for why we're here. A mobile app isn't just a bunch of lines of code, it's a business. And if you're here today, it's your business. And increasingly, it's a primary way that businesses across every industry reach their customers. Think gaming, travel, healthcare, media, productivity, e-commerce, and others. Think smartphones, yes, but also point of sale systems, IoT, AR, VR, and even cars. If you're mobile first, the success of your entire business depends upon your mobile experience. After all, how unique is your product and how long will it stay that way? If you're enterprise that's moving to mobile, you need to create an incredible customer touch point with your mobile product. Mobile's personal, it's in the hands of customers, and it's your opportunity to engage with them with the least amount of friction. And on top of that, mobile's scary. Any number of things can go wrong, from shipping features that users don't like to shipping apps that don't perform well on certain devices and connectivity sets, to even launching in new markets and not accounting for the limitations of network data, and even having your Google Play rankings based off of metrics that you may not even fully understand. We work with every type of company and mobile team. We've seen every challenge facing mobile teams. We work with startups that exist entirely within an iOS mobile app. We work with e-commerce companies that are investing into their mobile app as the future of their business. We work with enterprise companies who, during COVID, face a fundamental crisis of innovate or die. From curbside pickup to touchless experience at hotels to remote health and wellness, the list goes on and on. We work with mobile gaming companies that need to deliver excellent gameplay experiences or risk expensive failed launches. We work with IoT companies that have zero tolerance for issues. If a mobile app can't connect to a smart device, then the users that rely on it to run their homes, offices, and cars, they may leave. And here's the thing, the problem, the problems are all the same. At its core, mobile is just compiled code running on unmanaged devices in the wild. And there are infinite combinations of devices, connectivity, versions, and even location variables. You need guardrails to prevent regressions from hitting production and to mitigate them quickly when they do. Also, you need to proactively measure and improve end user experiences. If what I've outlined speaks to you, then good news, you are absolutely in the right place. In this webinar, we'll cover 5 tips for working smarter in mobile. You'll walk away having actionable steps that you can take to improve how your team builds, tests, ships, and also monitors your mobile applications. Having said that, let's touch on the agenda for today. Here is the agenda for today. We're going to cover how building mobile-only experiences can exceed user expectations, why testing in the real-world conditions will prevent issues in production, how measuring actual user experiences is essential for user and revenue growth, why proactively addressing issues is crucial for reducing churn, how tracking performance KPIs is necessary for retention and engagement. First, how building mobile-only experiences can exceed user expectations. Users want their mobile experiences to run fast and to get them value as quickly as possible. They want a clean UI that limits distractions. They want to be able to foreground, background, and return to sessions seamlessly. They want simple experiences they can access with one hand while riding on a bus. Mobile isn't someone just sitting on a computer with a large screen, good internet connection, and lots of time. You need to make sure you're building a mobile-only experience. Let's go over a few key differences between mobile and web that will inform how you should think about them. First of all, Mobile is not web. For many of you, your background might be in web, whether you're mobile first or transitioning to mobile. You know that mobile isn't web and they're completely different. You can't expect parity between the two. Mobile's in the hands of users wherever they go, and that provides ample opportunities to engage with them that brick and mortar and even web just can't touch. Mobile is immediate. Am I driving near a Starbucks or a 7-Eleven and have some reward points I can use? Do I need to book a ride share, a new flight, or check into my hotel room? Mobile is increasingly the fastest touch point between you and a business. Mobile's personal. Have I not exercised enough today? Is the product I wishlisted now on sale? Do I need to send money to friends? Can I access my grocery store list when I'm at the store? There aren't cookies or pop-ups or those annoying virtual chatbots. You're not bombarded with information on mobile apps. You choose which ones make your home screen because you're invested in what they offer you. Mobile drives revenue. As you all know, users spend a lot more money on mobile. They're committed. You can drive brand loyalty that web just can't touch. You have more opportunities to monetize because there's less friction in engaging with customers. So what can you do to create a better mobile-only experience? We'll cover some of those tips for how you can create a better mobile experience. And to do that, you'll need to embrace the strengths and also the limitations of mobile. You'll need to ship features that deliver the most value. So how can you deliver value faster? How can you remove unneeded complexity? First, you can simplify your UI. You can focus on your key value proposition for each screen and feature. You can reduce your time to interaction. This is something we hear a lot. You want to remove SDKs and app sizes for quicker downloads and launch times. You want to audit your SDKs regularly. Do you really need 5 ad SDKs and 4 analytics SDKs? You'll need to make organization-wide decisions that favor shared tools. And how are you measuring app performance? How would you like to measure it? Are you using push notifications effectively? Can you gently remind users to exercise or buy or check in and take advantage of a limited time opportunity? Are you taking advantage of native APIs like camera, location, and Bluetooth? Can users scan QR codes to get more information on products in store or instantly reorder essentials like groceries and medications? Can users make a quick reservation or order a product for curbside delivery? Quick sessions, you have people that come in and out and continue where you left off. Maybe they're jumping out to check a message and then coming back in. In other words, are you building your app for fluidity so people can jump in and out as they need? Optimizing your assets, such as compressing images and loading only what's needed. If you load everything all at once, you can quickly run out of memory and cause zooms. This actually happens a lot more frequently than you'd imagine. One of the customers that we work with, they discovered they hadn't optimized their new product images for mobile. And when they were testing for Black Friday, they realized that if they had gone live, that a lot of their users would have been flooded with out of memory and crashes. We have another company that we work with that realized they were loading heavy images and video on underpowered devices in countries with poor network connectivity. If you're using web views, then reuse web views instead of instantiating new ones. How many steps does it take to complete key actions or reduce drop-offs by making things easier for users? What's your first time user experience? And how long does it take for users to experience value? If you're an IoT app, how long does it take for the setup process? One of the companies we work with, they make e-bikes. Their app is their differentiator, and without it, their bikes are essentially a really expensive paperweight. A key function of the app is locking and unlocking their bikes. That process has to be seamless. How often are freezes or ANRs happening? Users will abandon apps that frustrate them, even if it doesn't lead to a crash. It's not just about crashes. You need visibility into many failure points in mobile that coming from web, oftentimes you don't think about, such as third-party SDK, heavy images, or even cellular data limitations. Let's cover the benefits of testing in real-world conditions. Mobile has infinite combinations of variables spanning app versions, regions, device differences, network connectivities, and more. You have to understand how your users actually use your mobile app. That sounds basic, but it's key. Otherwise, you'll end up spending um, valuable engineering resources chasing down issues that could easily have been avoided if you would have just made an informed decision about the type of experience you can deliver. How does your app consume battery or memory? Are you running heavy processes that drain the battery? For example, background tasks, device wakes, frequent content refresh syncs, push notifications and alerts, and checking location too frequently. Are you loading and storing too many images? Are you loading heavier images than the device can handle? If so, how would you know? And how would you like to know? How much data does your app consume? Not everybody has Wi-Fi. And how much data does your mobile app use? Are your third-party SDKs taking up too much data? If so, how do you know? How does your app react to device conditions, such as low power mode? We've found that around 20% of users on iOS are in low power mode. And this causes the phone to behave differently. And it impacts your GPU and your CPU. And oftentimes we see a lot of app failures related to that. How many of your iOS crashes are related to low power mode? Connectivity changes. Can your app gracefully handle those without losing state? And how do you track that today? CPU pegging. Where does your app do heavy processing that's overloading the CPU? Can you break it up into manageable chunks or otherwise just remove that work? Let's cover a few examples of that. Who will use your mobile app? What devices and regions do they live in? And what's the network connectivity? As we mentioned up front, we work with a lot of different types of customers. Here's some examples that we've seen. If your mobile product is for a select group of individuals that share key usage patterns, you have to know so that you can build a robust user experience. One of our customers is an educational app for medical students and professionals. They download surgical simulations to learn how to perform complex medical procedures. In testing, the mobile app worked great. It was flawless. However, they started to get complaints about incredibly long startup times, oftentimes up to 30 minutes. It turns out the mobile app was being used in hospitals, and they have concrete floors and walls and poor internet connectivity in rooms. The app would struggle to download those heavy assets under those conditions. The solution for them was to load that in the background while the user could navigate existing simulations. The same applies for many productivity applications for use in warehouse, on oil rigs, or on farms. You know how and where it'll be used, but have you tested it under those conditions? An agricultural app kept experiencing crashes when the app had poor network connection. And by understanding those conditions, they built offline functionality to seamlessly handle connectivity and changes in the field. Your mobile developers will have a great connection and great hardware when testing. What matters really is how your users will experience it. The same mobile applications won't necessarily transfer to new markets. It's not just copy and paste. If they have different devices and connectivity, you must understand how their experience will change. For example, we work with a dating app who's very successful in the US, and they were planning a launch in India. What they discovered was conditions were so different that users in India were having a poor user experience. They had failed to adequately test the real-world conditions of this new market. We have a gaming company that we work with that will launch a game in a smaller market and ensure it hits performance KPIs before they launch in larger markets. In this way, they don't waste marketing spend acquiring new users when the game isn't ready for prime time. On iOS, there are fewer devices to support, but globally, Android is king. The sheer number of devices is staggering, and you have to test on device types that you'll support, including the performance of your vendors, or else you risk negative reviews that will hurt your brand and revenue. For example, ad SDKs frequently freeze, cause crashes, and even ANRs. Knowing which vendors play nice with your device distribution is key to balancing performance with your revenue targets. The key takeaways on testing are first, knowing your market and demographics. Mobile isn't web. It's not served in a protected sandbox with minimal failure points. You need to make sure you know which devices and regions are important and which you want to support. Test in real world conditions. Before you support a new device or region, you should test the real world conditions. Mobile's global, so users in a variety of markets can download and use it. Negative reviews, because your app underperforms, can affect your reviews, ranking, and discoverability. For example, mobile game companies will roll out games in new regions like we've discussed to ensure adequate performance before going wide. Can you reduce app size or features and SDKs to expand your devices that you can support? You can turn off features or vendors that won't perform well. For example, add SDKs that frequently cause slowdowns and lead to ANRs. Do they only happen on certain devices? Can you turn off the add SDK to control that? Understand your trade-offs before you enter a market. Look at the device, the OS, and the region level. If you don't enter a market, what are the costs? Or is it worth it to build a completely different app? You can set and enforce performance budgets. A performance budget is a clearly defined limit on one or more performance metrics that the team agrees not to exceed, and that's used to guide design and development. These are heavily used in mobile games when you can only accomplish so much work per frame. Teams have a budget for the physics, animation, and even AI. You can do the same. These can be timings like startup time, time to send a message, time to upload a photo, or even time to launch a video. These amounts can be like the number of SDKs you load, or the number of images you download, the number of network requests you make. With budgets, you have accountability, and appropriate tests can prevent bloat. A lot of people aren't currently tracking this. If you're not, what would you like to start tracking, and how do you want to improve it? Many things can go wrong when delivering mobile experiences at scale. These could be issues with certain combinations of connectivity, vendor, device, and app version. And in addition, poor user experiences can happen in the absence of a crash or known error. Your Uber app doesn't have to crash for you to switch to Lyft if it's taking too long to load or find a ride. And it's absolutely vital that you measure the user experience in production so you can proactively make informed decisions that grow retention, engagement, and revenue. That starts with tracking UI response times. You can't rely on network response times as measured by backend systems. A hotel company we work with realized they had a booking endpoint that was taking nearly 8 seconds to complete. On the back end, that endpoint looked great, but the front end told a different story. How are you tracking client-side network calls? How long do they take to load? Can you check purchase failures by payment type, such as Apple Pay or Google Pay versus PayPal? You can measure UI response time by the way it's perceived by users. You also can measure frustration signals like rage taps and even abandons. How do users use your app? Do they load it frequently for short periods of time? Do they load it once and have longer sessions? For example, people will wait a bit longer when loading a mobile game they want to play for 20 minutes, but every time they load a social media app, it better load quick. Measure launch time and resume time. I have an app that my kids use every single night. It's a toothbrush app, and I dread that app. I hate every time I have to go to open it because every time I do, it just sits and loads. Often I have to force close the app and reload it. When it does load, screens freeze, and it's pretty frustrating. It makes the not so fun process of brushing your kids' teeth even less fun. So much so that I am happy to report that I've deleted the app and it is banned in my home. We'll no longer use it. Reduce the time to value. Startup time performance. Before you're using an app, users must launch it and wait. How long are you forcing users to wait? Are you measuring and monitoring startup time performance for all of our screens? Do you know when a user abandons your startup? How long does it take to upload a photo, add an item to cart, stream a video, make a purchase, or even load a map? Oftentimes, apps can defer loading content until it's needed. Load the next article as the user reads the current one. Same with product images. Defer SDKs until you really need them. How long do users wait on frozen screens? You can monitor device-side networking to find where all third-party ad SDKs, like ad vendors, are blocking the main thread. ANRs will hurt your Google Play Store ranking, which will greatly increase your user acquisition spend. Web views, you can create too many as opposed to reusing them. Even in a carousel, you can reuse existing ones. They're heavy on memory, can fail and load blank screens, and frequently cause ooms. Do you serve different endpoints for mobile opposed to web? E-commerce companies frequently encounter ooms with unoptimized product screens. Monitoring your network client side. Mobile teams frequently use network error reporting as their only performance monitoring. You'll miss out on many performance issues that can cost you users. We've had customers whose mobile apps were failing due to ad providers, video streaming partners, and even analytics SDKs. You need to discover slowdowns that backend monitoring frequently misses. What happens on the device is much different than what happens on your servers. You could have bottlenecks, duplicated calls, and even blocking network calls that cause broken experiences. You need to ensure that you have a good offline experience. Are you properly caching assets so users can still interact until they get connectivity back? How do you handle failed web views that lead to blank screens? Do you automatically reload them? You can reload key functionality, but let unnecessary functionality stay broken, like a failed ad load. How do you handle key user moments like failed purchase or add to cart? Can users pick up where they left off? And finally, sometimes users need to be given a visual indicator to let them know what the issue is. For example, we have a rideshare app that would load a map during startup. If the user had no connectivity, the app would appear frozen. Simply by deferring the map load until later and showing a helpful message letting the user know that they didn't have internet connection, users were oftentimes more likely to stick around instead of force closing the app because they knew what was happening. In mobile, things will go wrong. It's unavoidable. What's not unavoidable is how your team is equipped to identify and respond to issues. If they're forced to wait until they hear about problems on social media or app store reviews, honestly, it's too late. You need to detect early and often and have tooling that will allow you to prioritize issues based on their business impact. That way, engineers aren't forced to guess at which problems to solve. So how do you currently hear about issues? Oftentimes I hear about companies that rely on customer feedback. It could be negative social media complaints. If you're waiting to hear based on how many social media complaints you get, by definition, you're waiting until something is a big problem before taking action. Relying on the CEO results in inefficiencies. This oftentimes I also hear. Engineers will be pulled off feature work and be forced to context switch when you don't know the true business impact. App Store reviews will make or break you. If you want to wait for an App Store review, you're playing defense. You'll lack context, and bad reviews will deter new users from downloading your app. Backend teams, if you're waiting to hear from them, you're going to have to trust their monitoring tells the whole story, which oftentimes it doesn't. You end up being forced to wait for their alerting system, which will oftentimes increase the time to discovery. Rely on vendors to report outages. Do you trust an ad provider to report when their ad SDK is broken? Ad vendors, they have very different priorities than you. They want to show as many ads as possible. If your key functionality is tied to a vendor, their outage will hurt your brand. Users will complain and abandon your mobile app regardless of who's at fault, because in the eyes of the customer, it's your fault. So how can you be the first to know? The first way is target alerts. You can set thresholds for what matters for your business. Not every error log should be treated the same. You can focus on which issues deserve immediate attention. You can track your failed network calls device side. You should know when startup time spikes, third-party SDKs fail, and purchases fail. You can control who gets notified and when to reduce noisy alerts. For proactive alerts, you have broad coverage for outages that you can't anticipate. If the Facebook SDK crashes your app, you want to remotely disable it before users flood in with complaints. Changes to backend APIs that weren't communicated to the mobile team. New devices, regions, OSs, any number of new variables can contribute to failures. Firebase has delays in when data shows up, oftentimes up to 24 hours after the fact. When you launch a new release, you want to know if there's an issue immediately. If you're running an experiment or a marketing campaign, you want to make faster, smarter decisions with your user acquisition spend. Make sure you're getting ahead of these issues by leveraging tool that gets you real-time visibility. Do you just want to wait and hear about issues 24 hours later, or do you want to hear about them immediately? E-commerce companies have big events like Black Fridays that have outsized impact on their revenue. One of the customers we work with is immediately alerted to an outage in curbside ordering. Because they could react in real time, they resolved it quickly, and they saved thousands of purchases in the process. Another e-commerce company that we work with tested their Black Friday app and experienced a huge surge in UMs. They inspected affected user sessions, and they immediately pinpointed the issue being unoptimized images for new products. They were able to address the issue before it cost them revenue on the big day. How are you tracking performance KPIs right now? Many mobile teams use Firebase performance monitoring, backend metrics, and even analytics partners to try and cobble them all together. They end up jumping between multiple tools, or they just focus on errors and crashes. They lack a reliable way to track performance across their mobile app. After all, what percentage of your app uninstalls are due to crashes? If you're like most mature apps, you probably have a 99.95% or better crash-free rate. So you're losing them to poor performance. Mobile companies who focus and succeed, they focus on performance to win continued loyalty. You can't fix what you don't measure. Performance can be a huge differentiator. Your startup time can be measured in dollars. One of the companies we work with, they offer fuel discounts for long distance truckers. If startup is slow, users will either not use the app or use a competitor's app. Time to interact for them is crucial. What's your app's time to interact? Is it getting faster or slower with new releases? How are you optimizing your key value proposition? If it's a mobile game, how much of their session can they spend actually playing the game? If it's a dating app, how quickly can they find and engage with the profile they like? If you're a banking app, how quickly can you transfer money? If Venmo has friction, there's always the Cash App or Zelle. How are you uncovering where frustrated users are force quitting your app? We work with a rideshare company that realized that loading maps on the home screen was using too much memory, and it caused their app to freeze and users would end up force closing the app. This caused them to lose a lot of potential bookings. Hold third-party vendors. Slow or blocking network calls can cause ANRs, which hurt your Play Store ranking and discoverability. Track the network performance of third-party calls to understand if they need to be replaced. Alternatively, Embrace gives you the information needed to take this to an ad provider and even ask for help. You can compare metrics across releases for faster issue identification. We have an e-commerce company that saw a huge spike in ANRs in a new release. When they reviewed the affected user sessions, they noticed that they happened during startup, which led them directly to the bad code that was added in the latest release. You can create team-specific dashboards. For example, your monetization team should create dashboards to track crashes, ANRs, and even networking traffic related to a specific ad vendor. You can segment data by feature. Feature owners need to know if an issue is coming from their code. You can track those errors, crashes, and engagement metrics by feature for better reporting and visibility. So for the key takeaways for this webinar, You need to build in mobile strengths. Get to the point quickly. Test in real world conditions. Your app will behave differently in the real world. Test it. Measure how actual user performance, how actual user experiences. A stream of error logs won't tell you what an actual user experience is. Proactively address issues. Don't just wait to hear about them from your boss, social media, or customer support. Track performance KPIs. If you don't track them, you can't improve them.